Hello there, and welcome to the Harvest Report, Episode 2. On today's show, the amazing stories of giving from Africa, what established ministry looks like in the Dominican Republic, the why behind village church plants, and a conversation with missionary Mark Holmes. One of the amazing things of the job I get to do is that I have the opportunity to travel to visit many of the different countries that we work in. And we are currently in 10 different countries around the world, including 6 in Africa, 2 in Asia, and 2 in Central America and the Caribbean. And I had the opportunity to visit Nigeria earlier this year to meet with our missionary Mark Holmes there. That's when we held the conversation you'll be listening to at the end of this podcast. But while there, I was struck by the giving heart of some of the people I met there. And that's not the first time this has happened, but giving in churches on the foreign field in other countries might look very different on the exterior of what giving in churches here in the United States might look like. For example, I was at a church in a village in Nigeria. This village is a Fulani village. The Fulani are a group of people in Nigeria who are Muslim by religion and culture, and we have a church planter there in that village who has been given permission by the village chief to start the first Christian church of any kind that village has ever had. And he was able to get some property on top of a hill that overlooks the village and construct a church there that they have totally enclosed right now, just trying to finish the interior up, but already holding services in there. And I was able to go and tour that church with that pastor and be able to see the work there, meet several of the people he has attending the church faithfully already who have been saved and baptized. And while I was there, he wanted to show me their storeroom they had up in the front of the church, up off the platform in the front, the area where the pulpit was. On the left side, they had a little room, probably about 6 foot by 8 foot, 6 by 10, something like that. That was the pastor's office, and that's where right now currently he sleeps sometimes because they don't have a house in the village currently, and so he has a little workspace in there. But on the other side, they have a similarly sized room where he really wanted to show me what was in there. And when we opened it, there was some construction equipment and things they were using to continue with the construction on the inside of that church building. But also, there were a bunch of sacks that were just kind of stacked up, and there were a couple sacks right outside of that door as well that hadn't yet been added. And I was kind of curious as to what they were, and he told me that these sacks are full of corn. And this corn, these are the tithes from the church members. And so the people of that village there, they grow crops, they grow corn, and they don't generally use a lot of currency in everyday life. Every once in a while, they might take some of their goods to town and sell it on the market there to have some money to buy necessities in town. But the trip to the big city, if you will, is only a trip they take maybe once every month or two. Otherwise, it's just kind of a barter economy or a subsistence economy there within the village. And so as they brought their crops in, they would literally put it into big bags and they would bring it there to the church and they would give their tithe to the pastor there and to the church there. And I just thought, that's such an amazing picture. Obviously, going back to the Old Testament, the children of Israel were supposed to bring tithe of their grain and of their mint and of all of those things that they were growing then when you go through the law of Moses and bring all that together. And here is a real life example of that still happening today. But it just showed the first step in the growth of a Christian, if you will, that buy-in to where I am saved, I'm baptized, I'm in a church, I'm attending faithfully, I'm growing, and I know that God wants for me to give 10% of my increase. However that might be, whatever that might look like, he wants me to give 10% of that to his work and to his church. And so they're taking 10% of their harvest, they're bagging it up and they're bringing it there to the church. And that pastor, his goal is to be able to build a parsonage next to the church in that village. And his long-term vision is that he and his family will live in that parsonage and They will subsist just on the food that is brought in the tithes from their church members there. They might not have a car. They might not have much in the way of luxuries or niceties, but they'll have a place to live. That's theirs. And they'll have food to eat that's brought to them as part of the tithes that are brought to the church there. And it was awesome to see the growth in that church, the place where this church has only been going for maybe 6 months at this point, and already there is a core group of people there who are invested in the work of God, who are invested monetarily, maybe not with money, but with their goods that the Lord has blessed them with. And that was an amazing example to see for me. That reminded me of about a year and a half ago at this point. I had the opportunity to go to Madagascar to visit our partner there, Ben Angel, who has been working in Antananarivo now for somewhere around 15 years or so, maybe 16 years. And we began supporting his first 3 church planters he had being sent out of his church. But I remember the church plant that was the most established of those 3 had been going for probably a year and 3 months, a year and a half, somewhere along that time frame. That church plant was far out in the countryside, and we got in vehicles and drove out there. It took about 2.5, 3 hours maybe to make it out there to the countryside where the church was in a village out there. And they were showing us around the building they were meeting in currently. We held a service there on that day, and they had a bunch of the members come by and were able to meet them, and many of the children from local villages that come for their clubs and things of that nature. Actually, this is the same church plant where those 2 testimonies I gave last week, those ladies have been saved through that church plant. So this is that sort of setting. And the majority of the people who have been coming to this church, especially at that time, were women and children. The pastor was having a very hard time getting men to be willing to come and to listen to the word of God being preached. A very difficult time discipling people. Most of the people in the villages around there were illiterate, and so they're unable to read the word of God for themselves. Just a lot of issues that have required creative means and methods to make sure that a church is established and rooted within that area. But even with all of those challenges and difficulties that pastor was facing, he took us over probably about a quarter or half mile walk away from where that church was, over to an open field where one of the church members had donated a little piece of land, and he showed me on that piece of land there was a pile of bricks. And that pile of bricks, I have no idea how many bricks were in it. I am not fantastic at estimating brick counts by looking at a pile. We have a couple pictures we'll put on the screen now. But that pile of bricks represented the intention of the membership of that church to build a structure there, to build a church that was their own. So they didn't have to rent a building anymore. So they didn't have to move to different places now to continue holding meetings. They were going to build their own church building. And as I began looking at that pile of bricks, it really strikes you in the heart when you realize that 1 or 2 of those bricks may represent all of the income that one of those church members has left over in a month. And they're taking, talk about the widow's 2 mites, when we talk about sacrificial giving all that they had. These are church members who are taking all that they have after they survive, and they're giving that to buy a brick or 2 bricks or 3 bricks so they can begin to stockpile them, because they have the hope that one day in the near future they're going to have enough bricks to begin construction on a church building there, their church, where they can meet together and worship God, where they can hear God's word preached and be taught the truth of Scripture. I thought that represented the next step in Christian growth, moving beyond just your tithes, just that which is required of you, and getting a vision for what your church can be. Getting a vision for a gospel lighthouse that has staying power, that has permanence, that you are literally invested in yourself, that you are helping to build, that you are taking your hands, your mind, that you are taking your life and you are pouring it into that place, into that church. How challenging and convicting it was to see that for me and to meet those people. And then I think of the third evidence of giving I saw in Africa. This was also in Nigeria. I had the chance to preach the commissioning service for a church planter that we just took on last week, who was starting a church on the outskirts of Abuja in sort of a suburb of the city there. And he was being commissioned and sent out by the first church plant that missionary Mark Holmes had started there. A national man pastors that now. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to hear about that church's missions program. That church still doesn't have their own building. They are a church plant in Abuja. Land there is very expensive. They've been renting the same kind of community center for probably somewhere along the lines of 8 to 10 years now. They've been renting there. And as they begin to talk about their missions program, they were referencing something they were calling the 1000 Club. And it turns out what this club is, what this program is, it is a program amongst the national church plants there in this country where there is a push for people to commit to give 1,000 naira per month or 1,000 naira per week. What that equates to in US dollars is about 67 cents. And that's the push, to get people to sacrifice of what they have to try to get 67 cents a week or a month. And you got to understand, we fully support pastors there in Nigeria for $150 a month. That breaks down to about $35 or $40 a week. We're talking about giving on a level which might not seem humongous to us here in the United States, what might seem like what we have left over in our pockets. But people are excited to get involved. And this isn't to help build their own church. This isn't to help grow their own ministries. This is to invest in planting churches somewhere else, to invest in sending missionaries to other countries. These are local people who have been reached by American missionaries or the products thereof, and are now pooling together their resources, meager as they may be, to send church planters and missionaries somewhere else, to bless someone else with a message that was brought to them. How greatly does that represent our responsibility to get the message to somebody else? If people on what we would consider to be the mission field can have a burden for missions, to have a burden to get the gospel to other countries, to other peoples, then we can have a burden as well. We can be personally invested as well. We can do better than 67 cents a week. We can do quite a bit better than that. And we are expected to do our part, just like people in Nigeria are doing their part, just like people in Madagascar are doing their part, just like people in the Philippines and Mexico are doing their part. We must all do our part to help somebody else hear the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, the goal in starting churches is not just to fund those church plants forever and ever. The goal is for those church plants to become self-supporting and indigenous. And we have been able to see that in a great way in the country of the Dominican Republic, specifically in Santo Domingo. I want to highlight a pastor named Pastor Isaias. This pastor we supported somewhere along the lines of 9 to 10 years ago. We stopped his support about 7 years ago at this point. And I had the opportunity to see the place where he had started his church, and went back through his reports and saw the pictures of that place. And he started his church in a carport, and he had, it was being used as a restaurant at this point, and he had a little carport on the side that he was able to fit about 12 to 15 chairs in when he absolutely slammed them in there. And that's where he started. And we were able to help take care of his living expenses. We were able to help meet that pastor's needs so he could continue to go out and reach people and witness and see people saved and lives changed. And that church began to grow. And we stopped supporting him again about 7 years ago. And I didn't have anything in the way of records from him over the past 7 years. But while I was in the Dominican Republic last year, I had the chance to go back and see what's happening in that work now. That church is no longer meeting in a carport. They've moved just across the street. You can literally see the carport they were in from the place they're in now. But now they have a beautiful storefront church there. They have about 75 or 80 chairs that they can fit in there, with a platform, with a piano, with a little sound system they've been able to set up there. And that church is taking care of its own expenses. It has a dedicated and a regular membership there that pays its pastor's salary, that is able to pay all of the expenses for the church, that has its own missions program. They Also, as a church, we're able to buy a 15-passenger van to be able to begin a van route to pick up people and bring them to church. And they bought that entirely with their own money, no help from the United States or from the missionary. In fact, when we got there, our missionary partner there, Ronnie Autry, didn't even know they bought a van. And they've been able to do all of those things themselves because that is a self-supporting and self-sustaining church. That is the product of Global Baptist Church Planners. That's what's able to happen when a national church planner is empowered, is freed up to do what God has called him to do, and can fully invest himself in the work. That is the end goal. And we're so excited to see that happening, not only in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, but all across the world, in Mexico, in Argentina, in Nigeria, in India, in the Philippines. The work of God continues, and it is established to continue reaching people. Now, most of the places we start churches aren't necessarily in large cities or villages. We talk about those some, but many of our church plants are going to be in villages. And I've talked with some people who are curious about that, if you will, why it is that we even spend time trying to reach out to small villages when there are so many cities with such large numbers of unreached people within them. Well, most of the people within a country, while yes, the greatest concentration of them will be in a city, most of the people generally do live in the countryside. And in the countryside, the vast majority of people do not have access to cars or motorcycles or forms of transportation of that sort. Most of their traveling is going to be by foot. It's going to be walking, which severely limits the distance that people can travel. And quite frankly, I'm not willing to say that people in these villages over here just don't get to have a church because they can't drive the 15 miles to come to the main city over here. No, you just don't get a church. You don't just get the gospel. No, those people need the gospel as well. And we're so blessed to be able to work with so many men who have a burden to go to those villages. For many of them, those are their home villages where they've come from, to go back and plant churches there. And when you plant a church in a village, you're not only reaching that village of maybe 1,500, 2,000 people, but you're also reaching the outlying villages. Maybe a village over here about 6 or 7 kilometers away with 500 people. Maybe a village up the hillside over here with another 250 or 300 people. You're reaching all of those villages around there as well. And when we establish a church in that village, there is also a greater openness that you find in the hearts of the people there. Within the large cities, there will be many competing religions that are already active there. You'll have Catholics, you'll have different cults there. You might have Islam there already in many African and countries we work in, as well as the Philippines. Whereas if you go out to the village setting, people there generally are untouched by any sort of religious message whatsoever. They might have their ancestral traditions that they hold on to. They might have some shallow allegiance to Islam or to Catholicism, but there is a much greater opportunity for the message of the gospel to find purchase within hearts, because people are just hungry to hear something. And when we bring the truth to them, that is what they get to receive, and the gospel often finds good ground where it can be planted and grown up. Also, it takes much less to get churches established in those communities. Land is much cheaper, and in fact, oftentimes the village elders or chiefs will give the church plant some land if the church planter has a good relationship with them. And then construction is much cheaper as well, meaning we can find permanence in a much shorter amount of time. And we have been blessed to see great success in our village church planting efforts in many different countries around the world, and are excited to continue to do so. Many of those village church plants are in Nigeria, and I was blessed, as I said, to be there with our missionary Mark Holmes about a month and a half ago and see the amazing work that is going on there. God is just doing a great thing there, and Brother Mark Holmes will, I'm sure, challenge you and inform you as to how you can be a part in the work of missions, how you can better connect and work through missionaries in this conversation. It's my privilege today to be here with missionary Mark Holmes in Nigeria, who has now been here nearly 30 years now, right? 25?
25.
25. That's close to 30.
We'll 25 with our mission board. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, it's been a blessing to be with him and be able to see the work they're doing here in Nigeria between Truth Baptist Church and Providence Baptist College and Seminary and the many church plants they have around here. We'll go ahead and start off, if you will, talking about how it was that you came to a place in your life where you believed the Lord was calling you to missions, and then specifically Nigeria.
I got called to preach when I was 15, and started going to youth conferences and listening to preaching. And in Bible college, our college had 6 graduates in Nigeria at the time. And during church services, the early service hour on Sunday nights, they would give space for missionaries to give testimonies and give updates. And I got to hear from each of those missionaries during my time at college. I originally went to college thinking I was going to be a youth director or a pastor in the States, graduated with a pastoral theology degree, but the Lord was really working on my heart. My 3rd year during a missions emphasis time, I felt like for the first time, I surrendered to go anywhere, do anything. And Nigeria just kept coming up in my mind, and just continually hearing those testimonies. I was at the ordination for one of the men that I eventually worked with when we came here to Nigeria. Started keeping in touch with missionaries here during my college days and even all the way through deputation. And a year after Bible college, got married to Sabrina. We spent 2 years working with what became our sending church in Gulfport, Mississippi. And then 2 years of deputation. And like I said, the whole time just communicating with missionaries, asking questions, making a survey trip. Our plans changed a little bit as missionary we were going to work with came off the field, and we changed cities. But looking back, we're just confident that the Lord was in it all, because it got us to the capital city, a strategic place, a place where it was easy to travel. I knew early on that that God wanted me to start a college. I thought it was going to be partnering with another missionary to do a Bible college. And we tried that and made plans towards it. Even the missionary that we worked with, we were starting to plan a college together. But by the time we got it started, it was just best for us to have Nigerian pastors teaching with us. And again, even though plans changed, looking back on it, it was definitely ordained by the Lord. And now I get to teach with 4 Nigerian pastors, and then we've got a single lady missionary that teaches. I've got a full-time missionary as an administrator in the college. And that's been our main work that has produced church planters and the church plants throughout the years.
Right. Now, obviously, in starting a Bible college, a Bible seminary, there has to be a lot that goes into that. It's not, one day you kind of show up and, hey, we're going to teach y'all today. So what were some of the specific things you had to get for your ducks to be in a row, materials you had to source, challenges you faced maybe with the government or just with trying to house people? What was that process like?
The first thing when missionaries ask me about starting a college, my first word is don't. Just because, just as you're mentioning, there's so many things that go into it. And there's not really this is the most important thing, this is the next most important thing. It is a combination of God gave us the right property. We've got an acre and a half or an acre and a third of land and buildings that were already in progress to become a hotel.
Okay.
So perfect 20 hotel rooms convert to dormitories, conference room converts to an auditorium, and we've got space to build an auditorium like we've done just last year. And then another thing that's just as important is if you're going to have a college, you need to have influence with other churches.
Right.
If it's just for your people, then a part-time institute, I differentiate an institute as or a college as a ministry training school that has dormitory students.
Right.
And then if you don't have resident students, I call that an institute. But if it's just for your church, and that's fine, and that's what we encourage our church planners to start an institute. You can have an institute classes on Sunday nights, you can have it Monday nights, you can have it Saturdays. It doesn't have to have a set structure.
Right.
But then with the college, we've done it on a traditional schedule, semesters, Monday through Friday classes, different teachers coming in, and all of that required influence.
Hmm.
It required another thing, you have to have the property, the influence, and the ability to work as a team.
Right.
And I've got 3 other independent Baptist autonomous pastors working with me that we've had to adjust to each other's schedules. We've had to figure out things when one person travels out of the country or to another city or whatever the case is. And you've got to be able to work as a team with your staff, with the faculty, with other pastors coming in. And that's huge. And so we spent the first 4 years after we arrived here. In fact, really a lot of our first year was spent traveling around, meeting with other missionaries, with influential national pastors, getting to preach, getting to know different people, and seeing the need for a college. And then the next 3 years before we started the college, we started a national pastor school at our own church. We had started an institute at our church. And I was still continually traveling, even with a young church plant. I was still going out every month and just building influence with other churches. So that by the time we started our college, I had 18 students, and all but 3 of them were from other churches.
Right.
That even at 30 years of age, they trusted me to train their men. And that was huge. So I started with 2 Nigerian pastors. We worked with as a team and developed the property. You know, it was a big undertaking with a new church plant to also develop the uncompleted property into a place where we could house students, and that's been ongoing now for the whole 17 years that I've had the college.
Right.
So. And then as the college has grown, another thing that's huge is that you've got to be willing to always continually face the challenge of balancing your time between church and college, because the two often do not go together.
Right.
Running a college and pastoring a church often are conflicting because the students are taking your time. You've got members that need you to fulfill certain pastoral duties, and it's almost impossible to balance them out. And so you've got to be willing to take that risk or take that stress of trying to find the balance that almost never, it's never achieved.
Right.
And of course, even without saying, your time with the Lord and time with family, all of that has to be factored in. And so there's never a priority list that I could rank in order, but all of those things have come into play. But as I'm describing it, it has been our most fruitful and productive ministry, without a doubt, for church planting, for causing our ministry to get attention with supporters in the States, knowing that we've got for lack of a better term, a machinery in place that if you invest in our ministry, we're going to continue putting out graduates and continue to have the product that can potentially start more and more churches through the years.
Right.
And so it's all worth it, but it requires a lot.
Sure. And you made mention of the difficulty in balancing all of those different requirements on your time. How exactly does that mental calculus work? Is there a specific kind of formulaic approach you have to, or is it just whatever happens to need the most attention at this time?
I think over the years, in our case, it has depended on what kind of staff, what kind of manpower resources I have. There have been times where I've had to devote much more attention to the church because we're understaffed in the church.
Right.
Or the same thing with the college. Like right now, I've got probably the best staffing than I've ever had at our college. I've got a full-time missionary that's an administrator and takes a lot of the organizational load off of me. I've got 4 church staff that are willing to jump in and help. I've got teachers that I've now been working with. I think the least amount of time has been 6 years, and the most I've been working with 2 teachers for 13 years, and so we just really understand each other. If I was to
Right.
lose one of those teachers, that would throw the balance off, and I'd have to devote more time to the college. And at the same time that the college is very well staffed, our church, we just moved into a new auditorium about 7 months ago, and it's given me the opportunity to devote more time than I have in nearly a decade to really growing the church.
Right.
Over the last 2 years, we've seen our church attendance double. We've seen ministries get revived and revamped, and that so much of that is because the college is set for now, and I can just jump in and say, all right, let's grow the church.
And that's just is that just now the growth of having more room to put people?
That's a huge part of it. Once we knew we could start building an auditorium, we've had a too small of a meeting place for over a decade. Once we knew that we could start building on an auditorium about 2.5 years ago, we revived our bus ministry. We added a workers meeting. We started adding Sunday school classes. We started focusing on aspects of our church that, as I was caring for the college, some of those things had kind of fallen by the wayside. The focus on baptizing every week, on sending out more soul winners and having more soul winning times, and all of those things. Now we revived it, and yes, having the space is great. Once we knew we could have that space, we just really poured a lot of time and resources into growing different aspects of the church. To now, we're really now pushing to fill that auditorium every Sunday, and thankfully, over the last 2 years, seeing the growth to where it's really an attainable goal we can see.
Awesome. You mentioned one thing, kind of in passing, that I found interesting: the idea of having to not integrate, but become aware of and be able to work with maybe the national pastors that were already on the ground here, and having that influence. It's not necessarily something missionaries have in every country they're in. What were maybe some specific insights that you have from going through that process of meeting national pastors from here already on the ground with established works and integrating with the wider work for Christ here in Nigeria?
That's a great question, because I think the first thing is just for missionaries to understand that it's important. There's really not a secret that if you're not careful, you will go into a place, any place, whether it's a small town in America or whether it is your corner of the world on a mission field. Many people just go to a place and say, all right, I'm going to build this part, and I'm not going to worry about anybody else.
Right.
This is what God called me to do. This is where God has called me, and everybody else is just going to have to wait. And I understand that, and this is certainly not a debate on strategies of who's right or wrong, but I came here just knowing that 6 graduates of our Bible college had done great works here,
Right.
knowing that other missionaries for 25 years before I arrived had done really good works, knowing that there were great churches already being pastored by Nigerians. I felt like my calling of coming here was not to show a Nigerian how to pastor. I felt like that was already being done.
Right.
And so we took on a role of seeing how we could enhance what was already being done, how we could offer more resources, how we could offer support, how we could offer training, and how we could do things that either had not been done or people didn't feel qualified to do it. Like, just the simple thing of a national pastors conference. Now we run 6 every year in different regions. An annual youth camp. Now we do 3 of those annual youth camps in different regions. The college. There was only one other independent Baptist college when we came here, and it's a 10-hour drive away. And so there's definitely a need for that. And so when we saw that those were things that we could jump in and do, I just didn't feel like pastoring a church only, and I don't want to sound condescending in that
Right.
pastoring a church is huge, but Nigerians were already doing that. And I felt like, let me enhance what's already being done. Let me bring people, try to, as much as we can, to bring people to the next level, to encourage. And thankfully, when we did that, it was welcomed.
Right.
People wanted to host us, have me preach. I got to find out what the needs were in the country. And when we introduced ideas that are really simple when you think about it in the States, of a conference and a camp and a college, and it was welcomed and encouraged. And over the years, we've just seen people that were excited about it.
Right.
And so just believing that it's important. Obviously, every field is different. As you mentioned, you might not have the same opportunities with a lot of successful national pastors in the field that you go to. But at the same time, when I came here, it's not like anybody said, hey, there's a bunch of great national pastors, go out and get to know them.
Right.
Nobody said that to me. And now that I've done it, people say, well, Nigeria is different. No, every field's different.
Right.
You got to determine whether, if that opportunity is there, jump out and do it. Sometimes we're afraid of associations, and obviously you got to look out for standards and principles and doctrine. But at the same time, when we were on deputation, we found we went to a lot of different churches that were not pastored by graduates of the same college that I went to, that we had differences in, but God was using them.
Right.
And so, in the broad realm of independent Baptists, I have learned a ton of things from just getting around national pastors and saying, what can I do to help? Who reached you? What did they do to train you? How do you reach the area around you? And I learned how to be a good missionary from Nigerian pastors. And if I am a good missionary, I learned it from getting around those men and just seeing the importance that, as I was 26 years of age coming here, I had a lot to learn. And there were men twice my age, 3 times my age, doing the work that I could learn from.
Right. Now, talking about national pastors, we obviously, Global Baptist Church Planners, is a ministry that specifically works through American missionaries to fund national pastors. We as a ministry have seen specific advantages that a national pastor might have. Could you talk a little bit, maybe to someone who isn't as familiar with the landscape of missions around the world, just in general from your experience, what the advantages a national pastor would have, what the advantages maybe an American missionary would have, and maybe what resources can be provided either way to help each side be able to do the work of building a church more effectively?
I think you just brought out the key term of the difference between the missionaries and the nationals, and that is access to resources. As a missionary coming from America, the way it's viewed from here is that my access to resources are unlimited.
Right.
Now, I may notice limits to that, but in comparison,
Right.
it is unlimited. the dozens of churches that I went to on deputation, the affiliations that we have with ministries like Global Baptist Church Planters. It just gives us a great advantage of resources. Bringing a library here, that's just the books that I brought here makes my library bigger than any library that I've seen a Nigerian pastor have before or since. And all of those things put together, we have the advantage of good Bible college training, access to resources, yes, foreign funding, which is required to be a missionary here, and then an army of prayer warriors in the States, where when I put out a prayer request, I know hundreds, yeah, even thousands of people are praying for it.
Right.
And if I attach something, an amount to that prayer request, there's a lot of people, dozens of people who are looking to see how they can help me with that need. That Nigerians don't have that, or people, the nationals on foreign fields oftentimes don't have that. So being able to take that and use it to our advantage in planting churches, and planting churches that, as the philosophy of Global Baptist Church Planters is, planting churches that will not continue to be dependent on foreign funds,
Right.
that will become independent and self-propagating churches. I love it, and that's what we are setting out to do. As far as the advantage of the Nigerian pastors, a lot of that has to do with where they locate. If a young man comes and gets trained in our Bible college, oftentimes they can go back to their home place. Many times their family has accommodations already. They've got property that's been handed down through the generations. A young man can live in their family house rent-free. We oftentimes will go into places where, if you get to know the paramount ruler of the area, they will donate land to churches to where we don't even have to pay for the property. And so if somebody is living rent-free, if they get property donated, then there's very little investment that's needed, or not as much investment as needed, to make that church able to thrive with property, a building, and a place for the pastor to stay.
Right.
And so Global Baptist Church Planters gives us such an advantage of not worrying about, okay, how is this person going to live and eat as he is trying to build up a congregation where he's already, not every situation is like this, but where they have the advantage of already having a place to live and already having a place where they can build a building. Getting support for that man for 3 years takes care of so much. With the assistance of Global, what has also helped me tremendously personally as a missionary is I can point to Global and say, this is the ministry that is supporting you. Here's the principles, here's the rules, here's the guidelines, here's the expectations, here's where it starts, and here's where it ends.
Right.
Because a lot of times, when I brought out that first word of resources, if I'm looked upon as having unlimited resources, then in the eyes of many who begin receiving support, that support should never end.
Right.
I don't want to stereotype it and say that that's the case for everybody and that's the mindset of every national. But when you're just comparing resources, I don't want my support to stop either.
Right.
And so when it's coming from another source like Global, then there's not that awkwardness of the missionary started it, now the missionary ended it, and I'm having to explain how this started and why it ended. And a lot of times there's hard feelings and questions that I can't answer. Having a ministry like Global that already has the principles in place that just helps us tremendously to be able to say, we're going to be here. We're going to counsel you. I'm going to offer manpower, help wherever I can.
Right.
I'm going to offer resources wherever we can. We're going to pray for you. We have trained you in a discounted environment where really all you had to do to come to Bible college is feed yourself. We're already trying to offer as many advantages as possible. Now this outside entity comes in, supports you. When it ends, we're believing that you're going to be able to stand on your own feet with the help that's already provided. Now you can concentrate on not just surviving in your church,
Right.
but how can you now propagate what's been done for you and do that for somebody else? Now, use your resources, your manpower, the strength that you have as an independent church, the training that you've received, pour that into somebody else and start a church from your work. That's been the joy of our ministry over the last several years, is seeing third, even fourth generation churches birthed.
Right.
Because, and so much of that was accelerated. That generational growth has been accelerated by the fact that in so many ways we haven't had to worry or question, man, are we going to have any help in planting this church from ours? Okay, we have the help. Now let's concentrate on, as during their time of support, that 3 years, let's concentrate on getting them to the place where they can stand and not just, as I said, survive on it as a church, but now reproduce, multiply. Right. And so I've been absolutely thrilled by the partnership that we have, because when we first started out, I mean, when we started the college in 2009, we started we started really church planting a year later with some that had graduated from our institute. And those first several churches for probably the first 5 years were all out of our support. And it got to a point where I was having to consider whether we could continue this.
Right.
Because it was really starting to drain us. Plus, we were getting to the place where our initial church plants needed to stand on their own, and I needed to withdraw the help to help other churches. And as I mentioned before, you get to that awkward place of the missionaries stopping our support.
Right.
So it has been a tremendous help in our church planting. And now, as we're seeing multiplication of our ministry, Global has been just a huge part in that.
Well, we're so glad to be able to help with that. And I'll tell you what was a blessing to me, had the opportunity to participate in a mission Sunday at one of those first church plants y'all had. And seeing a church of believers here, it's pastored by a man who you reached here in the area, and just seeing a group of people have a burden to go and send out more church planters. They were there to celebrate. They have a church plant going on about 25-30 minutes away from there, with a man who is a deacon in that church and is going out, and seeing the excitement for that. But then in addition to that, just the difference in scale, they have there what they call the 1,000 Club, and that's either 1,000 Naira a month or 1,000 Naira a week. That's the equivalent of 75 cents US, maybe something like that. But people being willing to give of what they have to be a part of the Great Commission, and just the scope of now not only outside resources coming in, but now people within the country itself starting to take up that mantle of helping propagate the gospel. You've been able to see through the college, through your ministry, over 50 church plants now over the past 15 years, correct?
Yes.
What a blessing it is to see, if you will, the ministry growing at an exponential level. It's not just linear, where every year we can start 2 churches, but it's starting to blossom and grow from there. Do you have any sort of long-term vision or plan with your church planting work you're doing here through the young men that are being trained at the college? Is there any overarching guiding vision, anything like that?
Sustainability. We just want what has started here to continue, whether I'm on the field or not. or whether the missionaries I'm working with are on the field or not. Every mission field has its own risks.
Right.
And Nigeria's been in the news plenty recently, as and the overarching term has been insecurity, and that's
Right.
just a fact of life of living and operating here. Is I can't look at myself as being permanent, and so we want the works that have been started to sustain themselves and multiply themselves.
Right.
One thing that we've done, that we've focused on, and that we've even enhanced the focus on that, is trying to get every church plant to start their own institute,
Right.
where every church now has a way to train their own members. The new missionaries are the full-time missionaries that have been working with us over the last few years, have helped us with that. They've actually been traveling to individual churches and helping the pastor organize it, giving them the resources, going over how to teach the classes, preaching in the church and encouraging the church members to be involved,
Right.
printing promotional material. And so over the last 4 years, probably, we've started at least 25 different institutes.
Wow.
And not all of them are in churches that we personally planted, but it's all gone towards the same goal of every Nigerian pastor having a way to train his own members, because that's really the way that I believe it's going to happen. As much as I've talked about our college and how much work has gone into the college, to me, the Bible college is not the final answer or the only answer. The 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 best answer is local churches producing local churches,
Right.
and an individual church having the resources and the material available to train a new convert all the way up to where they become a minister. That's our goal for every church. And I can't guarantee that the college is going to be able to fund itself when I'm gone. I can't guarantee that 6 pastors' conferences are going to continue when I'm gone, or 3 youth camps every year are going to continue. But I can work on trying to guarantee that the thrust of every local church having a way to multiply itself, that's what I want to see.
Right.
And that's not just my long-term strategy. I think that's the biblical view that we ought to have as missionaries, to see everything that has been started on the local church level to be able to reproduce and multiply.
Amen. Nigeria, as you mentioned, has been in the news a lot recently, in the United States, with the violence from rebels and Muslim groups up in the north part of the country. Could you maybe speak a little bit to what specifically is going on there, and if it has had any impact on any of the churches y'all have planted or the ministry work you're doing here?
We are fortunate to be in the capital city that is. If there's a focus on security, it's always going to be on the capital. And so our own personal lives and work have not been adversely affected by the insecurity that's been happening. Really, the insecurity has been happening for the last 15 years, almost the whole time that we've been here. It ebbs and flows, and I don't want to minimize it when I'm saying that. It's just it's a constant thing that you have to think about when you're traveling and working in the country. Several of our church plants have been affected. It is a constant prayer request from our members who, Abuja is a centralized city, but it's also a new city. And so very, very few of the people that live here and very, very few of our church members are actually from here.
Right.
They're from different regions, and many of them are from regions that are seeing the regional violence. Some are from regions that are having kidnappings that have really plagued the country for years and years. The northeastern region has the terrorist activity, and we have since the last several years have actually drawn some Bible college students from those regions as we reach them through a ministry that we have for persecuted peoples. And we have, quote unquote, rescued some people who've been affected by violence and persecution. Some of them are fresh Muslim converts, or have converted from Islam to Christianity, and several of them have enrolled in our college. And so we constantly get to hear through that ministry the stories of persecution, the stories of violence. Some come when they were not able to rescue their family, their spouse and their children stayed behind, or they were taken away by family members, or just so many different. When you get on the personal level of individual families and individual people, the stories can be just heartbreaking. Whole villages have been affected, churches have been burned. Yes, the violence, as you read the stories, goes both ways many times when it's a religious conflict. But so much of it is on a smaller scale, a regional scale of villages being affected where you're not going to have the same coverage as in a major city.
Right.
Or if it was a civil war, or if a government was being overthrown. We don't wish for any of that. I'm just comparing it to the fact that you're not going to hear a lot of the individual stories that we get to hear in prayer requests, that we get to hear as somebody testifies about how their family was affected, how their village was affected. And so it's a difficult thing to comment on fully, because I don't sit where they sit.
Right.
I don't live where they live. And if things got so bad, I've got a blue passport where I go back to America. To talk about how it has affected me would be disingenuous, because I don't deal with the same things they deal with, and I don't want to talk about how it has affected our lives personally or our ministry personally. What it has affected is, we have to be careful in several regions in the way that we plant churches. We have to check in on several pastors that are in affected areas. We are intervening all the time in intercessory prayer over requests that we get from our own church members of different areas. And so that's the reality of it. And thank God the country has stayed together. I want to believe that the powers that be are making efforts to see that the violence is lessened. I'm a guest in this country. I need to believe that the country is doing its best to alleviate the suffering of people, and I've seen the efforts being made.
Right.
Of course, we pray, we continue working, and we just believe that God's going to allow us to continue seeing people saved, especially in areas where the gospel is needed the most in these northern regions, and give us the wisdom to be able to plant churches in a way that it's not going to be so obvious and so and subject to attack. And that's where we need prayers from our supporters and from our partners, that as we're getting into places that we've never planted churches before, we need wisdom to know how to do that the most effectively.
Right. Looking at the scope of the ministry as a whole, the strides that you have seen be made in church planting and propagating the gospel throughout the country, building a infrastructure that can last after you're gone. What is it that you believe gives you the most optimism and hope long term for the continued success of the work of the gospel here in Nigeria?
It's the Nigerian people. I absolutely love working with them. They're cheerful, optimistic, welcoming, hospitable, aggressive in wonderful ways, and zealous. It's just such it is the adventure of missions to get to learn the culture and believe that we know the people in a way. And I know it without a doubt it's God that led us here. I can even see personality traits that God equipped me for, just that's allowed me to more easily handle the place when some others have struggled.
Right.
And so my optimism for the future is the Nigerian people, resilient people, people that, as we talked about the challenges and the insecurities over the years, Nigerians continue to just believe it's going to get better. We're going to get through this, and we're going to thrive. And that's a wonderful mindset to be able to jump in and say, all right, let me add a godly confidence to that. Let me show you in the scriptures where that needs to be rooted in the reality that God tells us in the Bible. And I would much rather get to work with that side of it, where I'm dealing with optimism and trying to give them some reality,
Right.
than to deal with the half empty, constantly trying to encourage them and show them that there's a point, there's a purpose in life. No, I love working here and working with the people, and I'm so thankful that the Lord has seen fit to allow me to have this much time and to feel like we have made an impact, and to just believe God that it's going to continue for years to come. The greatest compliment that I get is, you're Nigerian, Pastor Mark. You are like us. And that's what I've strived for, and if I have achieved that in any way, all glory to God, and may it abound to seeing the work continue.
And I can personally testify to that aggressive nature. I was out solding with the pastor starting the work in Lube on Saturday, and he was walking into places of business when they're in the middle of talking to customers, and you can wait. This transaction can wait. I will share the gospel with you now. And someone would try to move. He's like, no, you stay there. I'm giving the gospel. And everyone would just stand there. Well,
and that's a wonderful thing when you can capitalize on that.
Right.
It's great. Now, when you're in the middle of a conflict, it gets scary at times, but and there's ways that you learn to diffuse those things. And so, yeah, you see, that's another thing about working here. All the things that I have said and all the positive that I have given is on the backs of Baptist missionaries who started coming here in 1853.
Right.
I mean, what a heritage of over 170 years of Bible-believing missionaries of all stripes.
Right.
Coming out here, and, generations ago, they came here and started schools. They came here and started hospitals. They came here and started colleges.
Right.
And we get to see all the benefit of that as we're working in this modern day. Nigeria is a place where missions and missionaries came to help, and it benefited the people. And so the mindset of Nigerians towards missionaries is, these people are here to help us. It's not like that everywhere.
Right.
It's not even like that in every African nation, or even in every West African nation. We have a great advantage being here as missionaries, that we get to see the best in people. You look at the news, you check your email, you
Right.
see social media. There's plenty of things that you could say negatively about Nigeria. I don't have to dwell on that because I get to see the best. I get to work with the best. And I get to take advantage of a nearly 200-year heritage of people that did the work before we got here. I get to reap that. So we talk about 54 churches, and after this weekend, it'll be 243 graduates. That's not my that's not directly because of my efforts, or it's not only going to my account.
Right.
Scores of people that influenced me when I was in Bible college, people I've never even met, people generations ago started laying a foundation. I've gotten to take advantage of it.
Well, to begin to wrap up the interview, two more questions for you. First question would be, if you had the opportunity to speak directly to someone who was either considering how they could become personally more involved in the work of missions and the Great Commission around the world, or maybe in the work of helping national pastors do what God has called them to do. Do you have anything you would like to say directly to someone in that place at this time?
What I've tried to tell people, especially recently, as I've had the chance to preach in missions conferences or even doing interviews like this, it's very simple, but read prayer letters. I pour myself into every semi-monthly update that I give. And if you read through our prayer letters, you're going to get a good idea of what we're trying to do and the opportunities that abound. You can do that without taking a missions trip. Taking a missions trip is important. That would be the next thing I would recommend. But reading prayer letters, reading the testimonies of national pastors, and there's a reason that Global puts out reports and quarterly updates, and it's not just for pastors, it's for anybody that has an interest in missions. When you're reading an update from Global, you know, one thing I appreciate about working with the ministry is you're very choosy in who you work with. I'm not saying that to boost our ego, but it's the fact that you're working with people who have colleges, you're working with people who have a desire to multiply church planting, and so reading an update from your ministry, you're reading from people who have put in the work of everything we've just talked about in the interview up till now, that have planted an example church, have a ministry training school, and are planning multiple churches. That's when you can see that in different regions of the world, you're going to get a good idea of what God is doing in our Bible believing ministries. And so so many more people have websites and videos that you can look at, that you can go to different ministry websites. You can find missionaries and see their updates and see their videos and get a good idea. And the other thing, as I mentioned before, is take a trip, see the work. I'm not desirous to, be hosting people all the time, but we have seen people leave from missions trips or survey trips here, and their lives have been changed. And so I definitely see the importance of that. But there's enough information out there, and visual information. Even when I'm doing my family devotions for our own kids, we watch missionary presentations. Number one, I want them to know that they're not the only weirdos in the world,
Right.
But secondly, I want them to have a worldview beyond America and Nigeria. I don't want my kids to just think they're well traveled just because they've been on a lot of airports.
Right.
I want them to have a glimpse of different missions works going on, and so I'm doing that with my family and showing them prayer letters and showing them missions videos. And so that's what I would recommend. Just get to know the people that are doing the work through the resources that they put out. Because I know we've spent scores of hours trying to put out mission videos and prayer letters and update resources where you can take a look and see what we're doing. And hopefully, as you read through it, get a good understanding of what missions and missionaries and church planting is all about.
And then finally, to end today, what is one thing that, maybe I didn't ask a specific question about it, but if you were meeting with your average American Christian, what is one thing you wish somebody could see, somebody could understand? It could be about the specific kind of nuts and bolts of missionary work. It could be kind of broad and theological in its kind of framing. If you just had one thing you wish more people understood, what would that be?
Guess you're going to have to clip this.
Oh, it's fine. We get a long pause of you thinking. It's supposed to be popped on you. Just whatever comes to your mind first.
That I don't know. I guess that's a good question.
Or we could frame it as, if there is a question you were hoping I asked, so you had an opportunity to give this answer because you thought it would be helpful.
It's been pretty thorough. What I would want the average Christian to know is that as a missionary, we have the same challenges that any other family has. I'm trying to get 3 college-age kids established in the U.S. right now. We're raising our kids, homeschooling. I've still got a teenager and a preteen, and one that's in grammar school, and working on growing closer together as a couple, and rearing our children together. I've got, as we're towards the beginning of the year, I've got goals and plans of how to improve our ministry, how to improve my devotional life, how to improve my leadership skills. I want supporters and Christians that see this to see that we are trying to be the best representatives of the churches that support us, those that have invested in us, and we want to be an example as a family, as leaders, as a pastor, as a missionary as we can. And that's our goal. I realize we could talk about numbers, and we have. I can talk about goals and plans, and we have. But I just want to be the right investment for those who have sacrificed for our ministry. And ultimately, beyond that, talked about the earthly part, that's my goal. We all have that goal of hearing, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And on an individual level, that's all I want. And part of that, while I still have an active ministry, while we're still here, is working so that those that have given to us all the way back to 2003 will see that the money that they put towards us, the way that they've invested in us, has gone to multiply churches, and have gone to fulfill the Great Commission, and hopefully has gone to help a family become an example of serving God, leading a ministry, rearing children that will serve God. And that's definitely what I want.
Well, I can confirm from the week I've been able to spend here that I believe y'all have done a great job of building a good family that loves the Lord. building a work that is training people to serve the Lord. I've been very impressed by everything I've seen, and individually, as a person, and then as a ministry director for Global Baptist Church Planners, I couldn't be more excited and thrilled to continue working with you, your family, and your ministry here in Nigeria.
Amen.
So thank you so much for your faithfulness in your work here. Thank you for your partnership over the years, and we look forward to being able to do much more for the cause of Christ throughout Nigeria, West Africa, and the world.
Well, it's been a joy to host you out here, and really been a privilege to partner with Global Baptist over the years.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Harvest Report. Join us next week to catch my full conversation with Micah McCurry, Director of Bible Tracts Incorporated. Until then, this has been Austin Reed. The fields are white unto harvest. Let's get to work.